because we're early, I think, in this new language of social return, and our brand is new, and when we talk to investors, they're still looking for the big return, I wanted to focus our conversation on what the word return means. Because I think if we can change our language from capital return to the value of a human life, and focus on that as a measurement of return, it would be easier for entrepreneurs like myself to raise money without having to have the M&A feature, the merger and acquisition feature, to pay an investor back.
There is a non-linear relationship between impact, risk, and return. And there is no common definition for defining social impact return or what a standard return is. And the field is somewhat at a tipping point, and it's evolving. But there really isn't anything to go on at this point.
Sure. Well, one thing that we experienced when we said we were going to do investing in double bottom line, we hit this question for ourselves. If you think of a grid, and this is maximizing financial return, this is maximizing social return, most non-sustainable nonprofits are down here, most businesses are here, really bad businesses are down here. So originally we were thinking, wouldn't it be nice to be up there? But the fact is, that's not really realistic. We just weren't seeing a lot of business plans that were up there. What we were seeing actually were a lot of business plans around here and around here. And when we got into here, it got really murky as to what our expectations were, what the entrepreneurs' expectations were. It was very, very fluid. So we actually separated two vehicles. One was we're looking for market-based returns in our sector, and we could really look at a business plan and say, does it do that, and does it have a qualifying social impact, and does our impact partner agree? And here, we're maximizing social returns, but more on a loan structure, and we're really dialing for social returns. So one thing is to just know internally where you are on this, where your prospective investors are on it, to make sure that there is an alignment. The other thing that we found is, then this is putting on my previous entrepreneur hat, if you can't find the right audience among traditional venture capital, often there are strategic players in your sector. They might be suppliers, they might be any number of folks in your entire market map that have an interest in both your business return and your social return and can get the subtleties of your particular business and what you're trying to do. And often they will become great, interesting strategic investors.
How have you, in your own experience, or how have you seen people go about finding what we've alternately called creating strategic alliances or finding anchor partners?
Wherever I went, I would bring samples. I would try to get the products out. And I somehow got my way into a social venture network conference, and they're very, very selective about what goes into the conference gift bags. And somehow I was just, again, it was just the sheer drive. I was able to get a product into that gift bag. Well, it turns out that there was someone there from Eileen Fisher, which is, a very substantial upscale women's clothing line, who got the gift, loved it. They were giving out this same product, it's a bath tea, in all of their 30 stores plus major retail outlets. And they decided to pick this up, and now Eileen Fisher is an anchor tenant, one of the major anchor tenants of the Enterprising Kitchen, so there's mission alignment. And it was just, was it a brilliant marketing strategy? Not really, but it was something that you all have, which is this drive and passion and energy and belief in what you're doing.
Yeah. I think it was Peter Drucker who has some quote about anything important that's ever been accomplished was accomplished by a monomaniac on a mission. Goes something like that.
Don't burn yourself out in the process, by the way. I wish I had shared. You understand it.
Okay, other examples, anchor tenants?
Well, just a quick comment on kind of strategic alliances.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, where do you go and how do you form appropriate strategic alliances? One way of looking at that is, have you started, depending on the business you're in, have you started with your peers in that space? Started talking to folks who are doing what you're doing or something similar to it, and trying to form partnerships and alliances to leverage your joint strengths. I don't think that happens nearly enough. Last week, for example, I was at a conference at Stanford on online giving marketplaces, the Kivas and the microplaces. Anyone go to that? Anyone attend that here? Good stuff. But what I found interesting, in addition to the fact that it's a new and cutting edge space, is that a lot of these competitor organizations were actually spending a good chunk of the time talking amongst themselves about how they could collaborate and partner and lift up the entire space as opposed to going it their own way. So that's one thing. The other thing, just to throw out there, and folks know this well enough living in the age we do, but leveraging some of these technology resources like social networking, LinkedIn, Facebook, et cetera, to identify strategic partners and not having to go door by door and knock here, knock there. Really to leverage these resources and find out what's out there in the universe and then take a more targeted approach.
I've seen a lot of discussions today about the benefits, the pros and cons of a nonprofit model versus a social venture model.
Yeah.
What do you guys see in terms of scalability and growth opportunities for companies or endeavors that choose both, kind of like the Mozilla Foundation, Mozilla Corp model, where you have a nonprofit with a social venture subsidiary? Do you see that that's an effective way of being able to manage the positives of both structures, or do you think that the organizational overhead and issues become too burdensome, other than Mozilla Corp, which obviously makes plenty of money from their Google agreements?
There is definitely a continuum. It's not one size fits all.
Yeah.
But there are definitely, there's definitely different risks or challenges depending on what you choose. For example, in the Mozilla model, if you're working under a nonprofit shell, and they have struggled with this, there is an issue in terms of salary caps, and there's a certain set of legal constructs that may make it hard to scale to a certain level just based on recruiting within whatever sector you are in at a market salary. That's just a risk to that model. It's a manageable risk, but it's a risk you need to be aware of. I would say the inverse of the Mozilla model has a different set of risks, where if you are a for-profit that has the model, you're going to tax your profits to give money away, which a great many organizations do. That tends to fray in the type of economy we're going into. When things get very, very tough, that tax, it makes it more difficult to scale the business. And it is often the first that goes. It's not an organic alignment. Again, a lot of people make a lot of money and do social impact with that model, so it's not bad. It's just that's a risk that is likely to emerge in a down economy, and you have to manage towards that. So I think you can look at the different models and say, let's play out a success scenario, let's play out a failure scenario, let's look at a market map of folks in that model, and it'd be a great thing if a researcher were to do that market map. And here are the pros and cons, and then you, judging on your goals and your risk profile, select based on that data.
Aren't we moving into a place where this whole theater creates a new corporate structure? It's not completely private in some circumstances, and it's not completely nonprofit, but there's something, and maybe it's a gradation of something in between. We're in the middle of building, we're a private company, we're in the middle of building a nonprofit that invests in other nonprofits that do children's services. That's what our goal is. So the blending the work that we're doing as a profit-making company with a nonprofit philanthropy-driven model is a challenge, and we're working with the team to overcome the challenge. But it seems to me that we're somewhere in the continuum between being, in this enterprise, a totally nonprofit structure and not totally a corporate structure. Does that make sense to you?
We have to give 30-second answers because we're almost done here.
Yes, it is a new sector. Governments, state governments, federal governments are struggling at it from a tax law, which is a big piece of it. Research analysis are struggling it from how to categorize it as an asset class to have a set of returns. I mean, this group is trying to crack exactly that question.
Yeah, my 30-second would be IRS, big barrier.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah.
Really big.
Yeah. Paul?
Yep, same thing. We got it. I mean, the tax and the legal barriers are still there, but that's why we're here to talk about how we can, work through those.
No, I have to stop. Sorry. The last thing, two things I would say. My organization, the Social Enterprise Institute's mission is to provide venues for leaders to support leaders in building social purpose businesses. And so we're all about creating peer learning groups and academies where people can be coached by successful entrepreneurs. And this conference is really exciting to me because it's also in that world, in that genre. And I think it's fair to say that we'll all be around either out back between, at the end of this program or at the end of the evening. So if you have more questions for us, please come find us.